Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about how do lift stations work. What these lift stations are is they are basically where water comes in from tile lines and you can pump the water out of those spots. So you've got to have somewhere to hold the water for just a little bit, and then you pump it up and out of the ground.
This is an easy concept to explain because it's exactly like the sump pump in your house. Now, maybe you've never thought about it this way, or maybe you've never even wondered, hey, how does that whole sump pump thing work with my house? Well, you've got this small little tank. It's probably a 5-gallon container, maybe 10-gallon container that's dug down into your basement floor. You've got drain tile that runs around the foundation of your house. That water comes through the drain tile into that sump pump and you pump it up and out of your house. That's how it works out in a field too with a lift station. We've got drainage tile that runs beneath the soil surface. It lets excess water in, and that's the interesting part, only excess water. So 25% of the volume in that soil area can be water, 25% air, and 50% soil. Once we exceed that and we're 50% water, 50% soil, well, then there's excess water that soil just can't hold, and that water is going to go into those tile lines. When it gets to this tank that we're talking about, kind of like your sump area in your house, and the water has to get out, you can use a lift station to get it out of there. Now, why may somebody use a lift station? Why do you need that at all? Why don't you just let it run out the end of the tube and out the end of the field? Well, it depends on where you're going. In some areas, there are drainage ditches that are dug. So everybody can drain into the same spot. That can run right into a stream or a river. It's easy to monitor. It's easy to shut off if you need to. And to get over and into those drainage channels, sometimes you need a lift station to do that. Maybe you have very, very flat ground. This is the case in many areas of the country where it's just tabletop flat out in the fields. Well, how do you get things to drain if it's all flat? Well, if you've got a whole bunch of water on a flat surface, you've got to create your own drainage. So with drainage tile, for example, you can slope that tile down as you're below the soil surface. So maybe it's 3 feet below the soil surface on one end of the field and 5 feet below the surface on the other end of the field. Well, to get it to go out, many times you'll run that into a basin or a tank and then pump it out of the field with something like a lift station.
If you're going to have a lift station and you're going to run a pump, you have to have power there. So a lot of times what people will do is they will run electrical lines out to that. We get a lot of questions about solar power. Well, the problem with that is you might be pumping a lot of water going out of there. We have, for example, one lift station with a 7.5 horse pump. Well, a 7.5 horse pump takes a tremendous amount of power. So a lot of times it's just not feasible to run solar power, but certainly some people could do that for a very small lift station. The other big question that we get is, do I really need to do this because it's going to cost some money? And the whole thing is, like Darren said, on flat ground, basically tiling isn't even possible if there's nowhere to run that water. But if you can create some natural slope with that drain tile, bringing it down to a sump in the field and then pump it up and out, well, then all of a sudden you actually can drain that field. We have one example of that on our own farm. That's one of the wettest fields in our whole county. As soon as we put tile in, that field has literally almost doubled in average yield. It's been unbelievably tremendous. With these lift stations, they absolutely are important in agriculture. They're tied together with a lot of the drain tile that's out there, but fortunately in a lot of cases we can just use gravity to get that water away. We don't need lift stations on our farm, for example. I mean, almost all the acres it's just done with gravity, not using a lift station. The one other thing I was going to mention real quick is cost. How much does it cost to run that lift station? For us, what we figure is roughly on average about $10 to $15 per acre per year to pump that water out. So it's actually a pretty good bargain when you take a look at, hey, if we didn't have that $10 to $15, we'd probably lose $300 in crop. It's something that's very important but it's just something that we wanted you to understand, especially when you probably have a lift station in your house called the sump pump.
One other thing you may have around the house, or in your yard at least, is our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?